I'm Tommy Costello, and I'm excited. I'm excited for this podcast today with Dr. Stephen Frueh, dual PhD in theology and psychology. Today, we're going to talk about the relationship between the body and physical performance and how our body communicates to us in the fashion of telling us what is truly happening and what are some tools that we can do to listen to our body and how that can improve our performance as athletes, but also improve our health and help us take care of ourselves. So today we're going to dive right into it. A big term that I want you to try to wrap your mind around: psycho-neuro-immunology. Okay, it's a big word, it's a mouthful, but there's this guy named C.F. Norman Cousins that you got some sort of story about. Stephen, I want you to start here. Who is this guy?
Yeah. That's a good question. It's a good place to start. The thing I observe is that we have a lot of concentration in this culture on body. Like, we get Botoxed and we get all kinds of supplements and we get this and we get that and we get deodorized and we get d. So we get a lot of input into trying to make this body better than it is. If you're an athlete, I think you get a lot of input, got a good coaching. I also think you probably get some pretty bad coaching. You probably have some big deficits in the way your body is related to and treated. So the idea of today's podcast is to take charge of your own body and how that body speaks to you. It's your wizard. It is your wisdom. It is your guru. Take charge of that body and let your body speak. That's a big order. Now, Norman Cousins was a journalist in the 70s. He wrote for Atlantic Monthly, a lot of places, very well known all over the world. And he went to his doctor one day and he was told he had a year to live, or maybe less. It was spreading throughout his body, whatever the heck it was. I don't remember very well the exact diagnosis. But he was driving home, less than a year to live, not an old man in his 40s. I think, late 40s. And he said to his wife, "You know what? I don't laugh." I don't know what. In the story, the doctor said to him as he walks out the door, the doctor says, "You know, I read all your articles and all your stuff, and I really like them, but everything is about bad news. Do you ever get to write about good news?" He's driving home. He's thinking about that. He says to his wife, "We don't ever laugh anymore. Would you do me a favor? Would you be the guardian at the door? Don't let anybody in the front door that has bad news. Only let people in the front door that have some good news. Would you do that? And then I want you to go to a video store." In those days, you rented videos. I go to the video store and rent a bunch of comedies. Don't rent any dramas. Don't rent any documentaries. Just rent comedies. And then I want to get these books and this book and this book, all about laughter and comedies and fun. I just want to laugh all I can and have fun all I can and not anymore observe for what's wrong in the world. I've spent 20 years observing for what's wrong in the world and writing about it. And I've got cancer, whatever I have, and I'm going to change that. Well, within a year, his symptoms were in remission. And he... eventually, they had a center at UCLA named after him, the Norman Cousins Center for Psycho-Neuro-Immunology, which is about how stress compromises your immune system. Now, that's a new idea for me back then. How stress compromises your immune system. You were about to say something, or should I keep going?
No, keep going. Keep going.
So what he learned was that you're in charge of something you didn't realize you're in charge of it. There's a guy, Eric Byrne, who wrote a book, Games People Play, and one of those games was Ain't It Awful? How people will get together and say, isn't it awful what's happening in sports? Or isn't it awful what's happening with teenagers? Or isn't it awful what's happening in the corporate world? They play the Ain't It Awful game, and that negativity recycles and recycles. And he's saying his body was breaking down because he was so immersed in negativity.
Yeah, so the relationship between negative thoughts, negative people, and maybe negative effects on your immune system.
Yes.
And so at the Center of Psycho-Neuro-Immunology at UCLA, they're studying how maybe positivity interacts with your immune system?
Well, yeah, it's kind of complex because there are people. It's easy to see. There are people that say think only positive thoughts. Well, that's bull too. You can't think only positive thoughts. You have to take on the challenges of the world. Like you say with the pitch goes in the dirt. You got to take that on some way. You can't just say, oh, well, I throw them in the dirt sometimes. You got to be able to acknowledge what's happening. So it's not as simple as thinking positive thoughts instead of negative thoughts. It's a matter of letting yourself see how you're oriented or addicted to a kind of negativity that doesn't have an outcome that you want. And then saying, instead of being oriented toward negative thoughts, being oriented towards proactive positive thoughts, being oriented towards, I think I told you last week that the playwright, Eugene O'Neill, who said there are people who look at the world and look at the things that are wrong with the world and they say, why? And then there are people who look at the world and look what could be and say, why not? That's the positive kind of thinking. How can we change this for the better? How can we have this conversation with someone we love that's in a more positive framework than a negative, judgmental, critical framework?
Yeah, so I was working with a thrower today, and this same sort of framework, right? Looking at this lens in the body and how we speak to the body. So the coaching that I gave the athlete was this. We were in-depth level of biomechanics, understanding the biomechanics of the movements. And this is what you do with your leg. This is what you do with your arm. This is what you do with your eyes, everything. You know, how is the body moving? And we've been on this now for a week and a half and understanding how the body works. Maybe you could think of this as, you know, the in-depth knowledge of how the physical body is moving.
Yes.
But it's been addressed earlier in our training that we are going to put a priority on the mental side of the game and how we can utilize what we've been doing with the physical body to enhance our mental performance. And so what I did was we were standing in between two soccer fields, actually, and we were playing catch. And I said, okay, I'm no longer going to dialogue with you about mechanics. So I'm not going to talk about your glute. I'm not going to talk about your arm. You're educated. You understand it. You have good feel for it today. What we're going to do is we're going to work on your mental side of the game. And the way that I want you to think about it is you're going to be here in the middle. And if something that you like happens, the throw, it feels right, I want you to acknowledge and say, I like that. And it doesn't have to be loud enough for me to hear, but I want it to be verbalized. I want it to be vocal. Even if it's only you that hears it, I want you to say it. So I want you to address it. Then if the throw doesn't go the way you want it, rather than saying, that wasn't good, or giving a negative response, I'd rather have you say what the fix is. So addressing the fix. And what I call this is acknowledging rather than affirming. And I think what we get lost in is a lot of affirmation. So either negative affirmation or positive affirmation, where you get so built up and you get so built up on one positive thing. And then you get so put down on a negative component that it becomes such a roller coaster and you get lost off that middle. So when you're talking about the body, I'm just thinking of myself. It's more about honoring your body every day and honoring the work that you're doing. What we were doing is we're honoring the mechanics side of the work, but keeping the focus on, did that feel right? Yes, it did. I liked it. Did that not feel right? No, I didn't utilize this component that I've been working on. Okay, let's utilize the next throw. And that's the conversation.
Well, when you talk like that, you know what I think right away is that there are neural pathways in this beautiful, marvelous, complex thing we call the brain. And neural pathways, we think of our bodies and our brain as kind of set, but they're not. This thing is always evolving, always changing, always. The number of cells, we completely change all our cells about every 7 years, and we just completely do that. So there are neural pathways that are being reinforced. When you're talking about the negative conversation, you're reinforcing certain neural pathways. When you're saying, Johnny, don't hit Billy, you're reinforcing a negative idea. When you say in preschool, Johnny, use your words, you're reinforcing a positive pathway. And Johnny's saying, huh? Yeah, use your words. Billy, I don't like what you just did. I don't like you taking my truck. Whatever it is, you're reinforcing a positive pathway, not a negative one. So you're always coaching. If you're not conscious of it, you can be reinforcing negative pathways when you say the ball went in the dirt. Don't you know if you had put your left foot wherever, whatever, and blah, blah, blah. So you're looking to open a different way of imagining how the athlete's related to the coach. We're looking at a different way of imagining how the athlete is related to himself and his own body, or herself and her own body, that how she talks or how he talks to himself about what's going on.
Directly affects it. And I've read some research, 40 trillion cells in our body. They don't know how to interpret.
Yeah.
They just do as they're told.
Yes.
So the old saying, the old adage of, I think I can, I think I can, I think I can, I know I can. The way it rings true is it's actually true, because your cells only know how to listen. They can't interpret. So they can't interpret the fact that you say, man, that throw sucked.
Right.
What it's saying to you is, my throwing sucks. And that's what the body's learning. That's what the cells are doing.
Yes, that's good.
So that's why the language side, and where we started with this with Norman Cousins, is the language side of it has a large determining factor on how it turns out for the way your cells respond.
Yes, that's right. That's very, very good. So when you know that, then you say, whoa, how I talk to myself is much more important than I imagined before. And what I do with coaching is extremely important to my development. It's not just a thing where I say, yeah, well, okay, coach, I'll try to do that. It's not that. It's every single communication is about your self system creating and responding to your life situation. So when you get that, then you can say, okay, my coach, Tommy Costello, is not only my coach, but he's my partner in something. Do we know what that is? Do Tommy and I know what that partnering is like? Is my ego in the way, or is his ego in the way? Am I open to hearing what my instincts are saying, or am I not? Am I open when last night on the way home, when I stopped and got a McDonald's hamburger, was I with Tommy or not?
Did you do that?
No.
Oh,
but I'm saying, when, you leave a coaching session and you have a big thing of French fries and you have a McDonald's and you have a Diet Coke or whatever, you're thinking you're alone in your car and you're doing it, but you're not. Your partner, Tommy, who's your coach, is in the car with you.
Yeah, what you're talking about is like if someone felt judgment for that.
Yeah.
It's because you're bringing other people along with you.
Yes.
And so that's a good place to go. You got to be aware of who you're bringing along with you. And I know to get it more in the context of probably the listener, where athletes or any performer really that has someone who's in a place of authority ahead of them,
yes,
that's maybe writing the lineup or paying you the bill for the acting job, or a comedian, that is being employed by someone for their performance. A lot of the times we negate what our body is telling us in order to service what the goal is. And you have to remember
that the industrial society started around 1800. That industrialization taught men to disregard their bodies. That was a huge message. You go to factories. In England, they took the men off the farm, forced them off the farm into the factories.
So you're saying on the farm you could listen to yourself a little bit more?
I would think so. You're working with dirt. You're working with animals. You're working with real stuff. You go to the factory. What are you working with? Ka-jung, 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 ka-jung.
Machines.
Yeah. And
we're not machines.
Yeah.
So now the question is, though, the reality is of sport, you're not always going to feel perfect. And that's the truth. You can't wait around for the day that you feel perfect to go out and perform. But also that balance of listening to yourself and having the ability to hear what your body is telling you, I believe is the bigger skill than thinking of it as, oh, if I don't feel perfect, I got to tell coach I can't play. Because that's not the answer either.
That's an important, really, distinction. Keep going.
So what it is you're grabbing a voice within yourself for what that is and what that's saying to yourself. And all you have to do is be aware of it. I think the challenge is most people teach things for you to make action on versus giving you some ground to be able to come to the product of your own conclusion. So many times people are taught 1 + 1 = 2. So in this context, your body hurts, you tell yourself you're not ready to perform, equals tell a coach I can't play. Well, maybe not. Maybe body doesn't feel perfect. I know I can do these things to get myself to perform at this rate, but I'm understanding the risk that I'm taking here with myself.
That's a big ending, because the athletic idea that you play hurt makes you a hero is false.
It is false.
Yeah.
But every athlete goes through it where they need to be performing at some point with something going on with their body.
They're pushing through something, right?
Yep. And in the technical terms, it's actually called the functional gap. So when you're
functional gap?
The functional gap. So
okay.
So athletes will consistently enter into a functional gap, meaning this. You could imagine an athlete on a pull-up bar, or anyone on a pull-up bar, and you say, do 10 pull-ups. And they do the first one, it's beautiful, it's textbook. They do the second one, it's textbook. Third one, excellent. Fourth one, they kind of grunt their neck and get their chin over the bar. And then the fifth one, they're getting a little tired and they're using a little bit more of their left side. And since they're a competitive person, somehow they get their chin above the bar 10 times. But we notice at rep 4 that they're grinding through it, or they're struggling. What we'll say is they've entered the functional gap at 3. They have the capacity in which to train for 3 reps. Now, does that mean that, all right, I'm only going to give this person 3 pull-ups for the rest of the time I know this person? No. What we do for an athlete is you allow them into a functional gap for only a certain amount of time. So maybe 10 is excessive if they enter the functional gap at 3 and we give them 6 pull-ups. We want them a little bit in that functional gap. And back to the conversation about pitchers, specifically with mechanics, they're not going to be perfect every throw. And that's why so many guys get hurt. When you're working at such high speeds, this goes into the conversation of one of my 10,000-foot view above of why so many pitchers are getting hurt. They're in the functional gap so consistently because when you work at such high speeds, it's easy to make mistakes. So if you were to drive around the neighborhood at 20 miles an hour and you're focused and you're conscious, it would be pretty hard to get in a car accident. If you were to drive around the neighborhood at 100 miles an hour, it would be pretty easy to get in a car accident.
Yes.
These guys are working at such high capacity all the time that they're getting in accidents frequently.
Are they also talking to themselves in a way that doesn't support their truth?
So what they're doing is they're performing for something outside of themselves.
Yeah, like the pull-up illustration.
Yep.
I could imagine my doing the pull-ups in your gym and wanting not to be embarrassed, so I would do 10, but the next day I couldn't walk.
Yeah.
Because I twisted and strained.
And so pitchers and athletes do that every single day.
Yeah.
You know, I have a really good friend that plays in the NFL, and he's got an oblique and an AC joint and a knee and take painkillers. And the question then about the psychology and what I ask you is the why.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what is going on inside that human that really feels like they need to be doing that to themselves?
That's why I developed the power wheel, because the power wheel is a way of picturing for athletes. It's a way of picturing all of the dimensions, not just one. One dimension is high performance, but another dimension is personal limitations. And it takes a lot to stand up for your limitations and still be coachable and push yourself beyond your limitations. You know much more about that than I do.
So how do you identify your limitations and maybe work around them?
Yeah, that's a very, very good question for everybody out there who's in athletics.
I might answer my own question, but I think it's more of a creative thing. So maybe think of it this way. I like the pitcher example because I live in this world every day, right? Maybe you're a pitcher that throws 100 miles an hour, but you know after 500 of those pitches, your arm is going to be toast for the rest of the year. I think the creative way is saying, rather than being this guy that everyone labels me as, is this absolute flamethrower of a pitcher, why don't I develop a changeup? And why don't I develop a off-speed pitch that is easier on my body? And even though everybody in the stadium and everybody on my team, and they write me millions of dollars of checks to throw 100 miles an hour, I know that's my actual limitation. What makes me great is my limiting factor.
Mm-hmm.
So how can I develop other skills of my game to actually take care of myself in the long run? And so I think about my friend as the football player who's a little bit undersized for the NFL, extremely fast, extremely tough, consistently puts himself in those situations every single offseason, and people respect him a ton across the league, but he's consistently getting hurt.
Yeah.
Maybe his game, he's got to start thinking of something a little bit more creative for his game, figuring out what his changeup and off-speed pitch is as an NFL player to almost protect himself.
Yes.
Is that a workaround rather than just saying, oh, these guys beat themselves up, they shouldn't play sports? That's not the freaking answer.
No, it's not.
It's not the answer, and it's what a lot of people want to say.
Yeah, the answer is an intelligence interaction with who you are.
Yeah.
I used to do a speech in Glendale long ago for PTA groups, and the title of the speech was "Next time you have a headache, don't take an aspirin." And that was what it was about. It was like paying attention to what you can do. These are teachers and parents, and they were consistently under a lot of stress. It's a big stressful job to be a teacher of junior high school students, for example. It's heavily stressful. So they'd get home and they would pop a bunch of aspirin, and have a glass of wine, and they would say, well, I just had to do it in order to relax. I say, no, you don't. What? You don't. Because then you're probably ought to give up your teaching job. You're abusing your body and you're abusing your soul in a way that gets you somewhere. That's what that football player is doing.
I know it's different for me because I'm not performing at the highest of levels, but I throw a baseball every single day. And when I was in college, and for guys who pitch at a high level, I know they understand. It's 4 Advils just as part of the routine to get the arm going.
Uh-huh.
And that's almost like a standard. Like everyone's got the Advil in their locker at that level. And you need the rub down on the arm, and you need the hot pack, and you need all these things to get going, which is true in a certain sense. But I really think that if you are at peace with what you're doing and at true peace with your performance, maybe you wouldn't need as much of that, and you wouldn't be as reliant on that, and you wouldn't need the aspirin and the glass of wine at the end of the day to just relax. So I think the work is the obvious work is let's work on the body. Let's fix the body. Let's fix the body. The arm hurts. Let's help the arm. But the not obvious work is what's going on in the mind that's making you so stressed out with your body, where your body is speaking to you through your mind.
You're talking about your culture there. You're talking about your entourage there.
Yeah.
Your coaches, your family, your learning, your growing up. You're talking about all of that, right? How do I dress my limitations? Every athlete you coach is an exceptional physical being, right?
Yep.
I'm not. I couldn't be a pitcher. I couldn't be a pitcher when I was 21. I didn't have that chip. So you could coach me all you wanted, but I'd never throw the ball more than 50 or 60 miles an hour, and so on. It wasn't my chip.
I could have got you to 75 at least.
But you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, then you have to look with honor and respect at the athlete. Who is he or who is she? And she's got a natural, just like some people with...
Maybe what are some questions that someone would be able to ask themselves if they were taking notes on this podcast? What are some questions that they would be able to ask themselves that would help them understand who they are and why these feelings are appearing?
First question I'd ask is, when and how do I talk to myself negatively? When do I do self-analysis?
Number one is when and how do I speak to myself negatively?
Yes. Write it down. Put it in your journal.
I'm going to go back and listen to this, and I'm going to go through this exercise. So
yes.
Go ahead.
Okay. The second one would be, have I really stopped to think about this beautiful gift called my body? The Bible says your body is the temple of the Holy Spirit. That's not a religious comment, by the way. That's a spiritual comment. It's an observation. This is where our spirit lives. That picture that's living within you is living in this body, not somebody else's body. And if you can't honor and respect that, then you're in trouble. You may be mechanically good, but you'll be long-term fail. So you ask yourself, how do I imagine this? What Jack Nicholson called it the instrument. He said, what's the most important thing is succeeding in acting? He said, taking care of the instrument. It's the instrument. That's what you're walking around with. That's your precious gift. And that's what your job is daily. From the minute you wake up to the minute you go to bed, you're an athlete, and your job is to take care of this precious gift as if I gave you, Mr. Athlete, I gave you $100,000 to invest. That's a biblical story too. Jesus said a landowner gave his 3 servants money. One of them blew it. One of them hit it in the ground, and one of them invested it wisely. And he said, the blessing is on you. So this body is that
investment.
Yeah, it's that investment. So
question number 2.
That's question number 2. How do I honor this sacred thing? I call it a sacred place. My body is sacred because it's what gets me through this life. It's what carries me. It's what carries my emotionality. It's what carries my imagination, my spirit. It's that. So you have to ask yourself, how respectful are you of your body? And then there's a lot of ways to do that. You can say, let's take an honest look at what and how I eat. Let's take an honest look at what and how I rest. Let's take an honest look at how my self-talk, first one, my negative self, how do I abuse my own body? You know, that abuse of your own body? In psychotherapy, we learned that children who were physically abused wind up abusing their children when they're grown up. So how you abuse your body or how you love your body, how you take care of it, how you speak to it, like we have a wonderful dog, a Great Dane called Dune, and I hold Dune in my arms sometime, and I just tell him, you're the best dog I ever knew, and I love you so much, Dune, and he wags his tail. I cherish him. I want to cherish my body in the same way.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
What would be question 3?
Who are my influencers? I have a little statement I like to make. In order to love your family, you have to first leave your family. In order to love your body, you have to leave all your old notions. The way you were taught, like in New Jersey, you were taught to play hurt, or you were taught tough it out. You know, when you go to work, we'd make fun of the guys who stayed home sick. You know, and this guy's a real good worker because he can work hurt, he can work sick. He doesn't care about his body. He'll drink a lot at night when he goes home, and he'll come in hungover, and he'll keep working. The people who abused their body were idealized. The people who took care of their body was seen as weak. So you look at that conversation in your history. Who are the influencers? Who are the people who've taught me? Well, obviously, the first influencer, most powerful influencer, was your mother, and then your father. But then there were a lot of other associate professors of how Tommy should treat his body. And you have to look at them. And you have to be able to say, hey, you know, that wasn't so good. That over there was really good. I could have more of that. Because there are people who can empathize with you and what you're doing as an athlete and really be next to you and be coaching in a way that's empathic and wise. And there are people who just want their career to be furthered by you performing. So that would be my third question.
It's beautiful. So I'd take some notes on those 3 questions if you made it the distance with us here today, and really start to think about those. Write them down in a journal. Work with those.
Yes.
Do some work with those questions.
Yes.
Because it's not a surface level, write it down, have an answer, and that's your answer. I think this is an ever-evolving component of your life, and we need to honor and respect what's going on with our body. I think I'd like to share too, for myself, very motivated, love training, love eating right. I've always loved that. And then as the work grew and the opportunities expanded, I would continue to fuel the body with more because I want to take on more.
Yes.
And then what I realized is I wasn't able to do more by working more. I had to create my changeup, create my curveball, and take a little bit more off me so that I could achieve at a higher level. And so, for example, it's not like my work ethic changed, but integrating a few daily routines or once a week routines to take care of my body. And if I was consuming too much caffeine, taking 2 weeks, 3 weeks to get rid of caffeine and not become so reliant on that for me to have energy in my work. Incorporating some treatments throughout my week that help my body recover. Maybe adding an hour of sleep on the front end, going to bed an hour earlier, not necessarily waking up an hour later, going to bed an hour earlier, and just stacking those little wins made the biggest differences in kind of bringing me almost back to center, back to neutral ground, which actually is more empowering because you feel like you have a little bit more control over yourself at that point.
So here's another contribution of psychology. Pay attention to your energy flow. Is another thing that I see. I'm not experienced in athletics like you are, but I see with a number of men that I've coached is they don't pay attention to their flow. So they wouldn't say, my wife says, would you bring the flowers out of the backyard and the chairs up to you, the garage and so forth? She had a big workshop last night. They wouldn't say, no, I can't do that. I'm tired or my back hurts. If you're not paying attention to your flow, you're saying, sure, dear, I'll do it. But you pay a price for sure, dear. You pay a price for that when you can't notice that you're Tommy Costello at 6 o'clock, you're one thing, at 8:30, you're different. At 9:15, you're different again. At 1:15 in the afternoon.
Yeah, understand where you're.
It's coming and it's going like the waves on the beach.
Yeah.
And if you take an energy drink when you need to take a nap, you're abusing your body. You know, I get what you said about aspirin and that's a different story for me. But paying attention to your ebb and flow, that's really important. For me, if I want to do creative work, it's not between 3 and 5 in the afternoon.
Yeah, it's between 7 and 10 a.m.
Yeah. And if I know that, I will schedule my day so in 3 and 5 in the afternoon.
So if you're an athlete, what I would do is I would start thinking about your training.
Yeah.
And making sure that you're creating your energy flow to spike it when performance would be happening.
Yes, exactly. Now, I don't know how athletes deal with that. You know, high-performing athletes and guys who have night games and early morning games, and the media and the money people and the media all have control over your biorhythms. So I don't know how you handle that, but you better find a way to handle that.
Yeah.
So this conversation, do you have something that you want to say? Okay, I don't know how much time we have, but this conversation reflects what we call the leadership conversation. The old style of leadership is my way or the highway. It's top down. It's that kind of thing. You do it my way. If you don't like it, there's the door. See ya. That's it. It's shaming, it's threatening, it's demanding, it's ego-based. It's little recognition for the person's boundaries or limits.
So what would be the new way?
So, and denial is praised. He plays hurt. The new style of leadership is collaborative. And it pays attention to who is in leadership. So if I have a leadership team at a company and there's 7 people sitting around a round table, the leader isn't the person, the leader is the leader, but the person driving the whole thing, he's acknowledging when you're in leadership, or when Lucas is in leadership, or when Elijah's in leadership, or when Stephen's in leadership. He's saying, he's got something at this point. Now, a good coach would know that, I think, and he wouldn't be seduced with his fear.
So it's part of vision and mission.
Well, then there's active listening to the person. There's curiosity about when the person says something. What did you mean by that? Could you tell me more? There's, like your dad does with the 12-year-olds, is a curiosity. There's shared vision. There's shared mission. That's in the new style of leadership. Companies that do that get a lot of mileage and a lot of traction around vision and mission, because it's a group effort. It's not one person pushing the whole thing.
Yeah, and so it's one way you could look at it is you could think of your body as a whole enterprise. And the way that they would take care of a massive enterprise of a company, understanding the vision, understanding the mission, understanding the leadership roles. And you break down this complex organism, and then you simplify it into simply your body. And you understand who's leading this thing.
Yeah.
What is the vision for this thing?
Yeah.
What is the mission here with this thing?
Yes.
Because we're only born with one. We're not getting another one.
Yeah, that's right.
We must be very clear on those things and understand and be aware of when we're getting away from that. And that's the essence of the conversation.
I had a wonderful conversation. I was doing a weekend for men in Santa Barbara a number of years ago, and there was a guy who played, I think, linebacker for the New York Jets. Handsome, tall, handsome, about 40 maybe. He was talking about being a football player, and he's talking about all his surgeries, both elbows, both shoulders, both knees, both ankles. I said, excuse me, JT, but why did you do it? I mean, was there that much money involved that you would abuse your body so totally? He said, we hated the coaches. We hated the fans. We hated the owners. Who we loved were each other. And that's what we did it for. So there's a brotherhood, tribal thing there. And I said, and that would drive you to push so hard you'd fracture your shoulder after the other shoulder just healed? He said, yeah, that wasn't the issue. The issue was camaraderie and mutual respect. That's how we got mutual respect.
It's kind of beautiful, honestly.
Wow. I said, wow.
Well, that's good. That's plenty for today. That's plenty to digest.
It's a lot, yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot there. Listen to it twice. I know I will. And there's a lot to be learned. So if you take anything from it, be a little bit more conscious about your body.
What we're talking about next time, by the way, is what does love have to do with it?
Yeah.
That's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Tune in.
What does love have to do with it?
Yes.
Good.